Welcome to a Wonder Junkie podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Anderson.
Nobody knows what's going on. Nobody knows. Nobody has the faintest idea. The best guesses are lies. You may be sure of it.
All right, Brooke, thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Oh, thank you so much for the invitation.
Absolutely. I've been really enjoying your work and the way that you build systems for training people about the breath, about fascia. And I heard you on the Way Forward podcast, which I loved. I recommend everybody go listen to that interview. That was just so in depth. And then it led me to taking your brain and breath course, your lecture. Actually, it was really well done. And then I took one of your breath courses online and I really enjoyed it. So as someone who likes to practice breath work and learn about breath work, I love that you connect it to fascia, and the way that you communicate it is amazing. So I wanted to have you on and share some of your essence with more people.
Thank you. I like to think that the Mighty Breath program I built is really different than a lot of the other breath work that's offered out there. Can I ask, how would you compare it? Like if you were saying, oh, somebody's done breath work, but they haven't tried my program, what would be like something that you would say separates it?
Well, I love that you go into the fundamentals of how the diaphragm works, how the intercostal muscles work. You're really good at just speaking about the body and the way that it breaks down. I did take Patrick McKeown's courses and got certified with Oxygen Advantage a long time ago, and took Wim Hof's courses and got certified, and then Dan Brule. And I just went down these rabbit holes and a lot of pranayama and all this stuff. But you are just a really good teacher. And that was what I really enjoyed about the lecture and about your conversation that I heard with Alec, was that I think that you're just a natural teacher. Your communication skills and your ability to go through, I guess you could say, you called it modules, or the way that you break down and decode different practitioners and different experts around the world. And yeah, obviously you know how to make video content really well. So anyway, it's just really practical and easy to follow along and understand how the breath actually works without getting too deep in the weeds. And then you also talk about it as rhythm and music, and all of that was very unique and different as well. So there was a lot to it that I really liked.
Okay, cool. Did you like training on your back? I know that's like a fundamental difference. In some ways, I know in holotropic people are on their back, but did it help you open up the lumbar part of the diaphragm? I think it's very difficult to feel when you're sitting upright.
I agree, especially for beginners. And even in the little groups that I share with friends and people I know, I love being on the back because a lot of people are not, their mobility is not good because of years of sitting in these desks, and some people are overweight. And so I think laying down is a great way to start, where people are not so focused on how uncomfortable they are and where their lack of mobility gets in the way of them focusing on what you are actually teaching. So I think it's excellent.
Cool. Thanks. That's good feedback for me. And I'm proud of the program that I built. It works amazing for singers. So it's just been like beautiful and hilarious to see all of the other repercussions of it's working really great for people with asthma, working really great for shallow breathers. Because it was designed for singers that are touring to detox and to double their capacity, so that when you're on tour night after night, smoky bar to smoky bar, you still have the ability to belt and sound clear and, clean your nasal glands. So it's been fun to realize that, oh, wow, breathing is just a fundamental thing, and all of us could get better at learning to connect to the nasal glands. How do they feel when they're swollen? A lot of people have this unconscious habit of kind of sniffing their boogers back up into their body. And then that mucus, when it lays on the nasal glands, it creates inflammation. And when we have that chronic inflammation, that's when the nose stops working. That's when everything feels stuffy for an extended period of time. So little things that I cover in that program can be really life-changing for people depending on where they're at and what they need.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I heard you with Alec, you guys went through, I didn't watch that interview, but I listened and partook with some of the clearing of the sinuses. And you just started with that. And is that something that you do with all of your clients right away? Is that clearing of the sinuses, getting everything open?
Honestly, with my clients, the people that work with me one-on-one now are really coming to me with very specific issues. And honestly, a lot of my private clients now are men. A lot of leaders in the community, like different doctors, different therapists, different business owners that have lived in an elevated stress level for an extended period of time. And they're trying to come back to a state of ease, almost like they jacked themselves into this like type A rhythm and they kind of forgot how to relax. So I really like to start people with that brain and breath connection. I think that creates a really good like rhetoric and vocabulary for what is controlling the nervous system, because we have all of these like tools that people have given us, like go for a walk and go journal and go lay on the ground. And all of these things to me kind of just, they're like the peripheral, they're not the center. All of these tools help us regulate the breath rate. But when we learn how the breath rate is controlled by the medulla oblongata, and when we just slow the breath rate down to 4 breaths a minute for 4 minutes, we are going to pull our body from hyperdrive to control. But if you're in hyperdrive with adrenaline, right, which is what every musician and athlete has, to pull yourself back down takes practice. It takes training. And it's really nice to hear like Dr. Huberman talk about 6 breaths a minute. I've heard him like start to really beat that drum, and 6 breaths a minute is what a lot of the research and science shows. I like 4 breaths a minute because of my own theory of how brainwaves and breath rate are heavily correlated together. And when we drop it that little bit extra, we get closer to theta brainwaves, which to me is, it's a space of resonance within the brain. Our brain is always oscillating between frequencies. It's like a musical symphony in here. But in this overstimulated, dopamine exhausted brain that most Americans have, if we practice breath work with a hyperventilation pattern, we're jacking the breath rate up. So any breathwork teacher that is mouth breathing at a fast protocol for more than 90 seconds, we're starting to create stress within the nervous system. And different teachers use that stress in their own ways. I think a lot of teachers use the breath as a drug to create a really intense, cataclysm of kind of like almost a drug induced state of mind. A 2-hour holotropic session where you're rhythmically breathing through the mouth, you're bypassing a lot of your nervous system, you're bypassing a lot of ease and comfort, and you are going to have an experience. Whether that experience is good for you or not is up to you. But in the overstimulated, when a client comes to me and they've been, overstimulated, working really hard, they kind of lost that state of relaxation. The last thing in the world I would recommend is that style of breath work. I would highly recommend a protocol where we're detoxing the lung field, then we're creating more elasticity and flexibility within that lung field, and then we're training a shape. We are training to reduce our natural breath rate. So if we can wash the dishes and stay at 4 breaths a minute, if we can have a conversation with our loved one and stay at 4 breaths a minute, if we can watch, your child's soccer game while you're pumping the pelvic floor and you're breathing, you have this ability to kind of expand into presence. And the reason why I talk a lot about artists and athletes and thought leaders is because when we add adrenaline to the system, it creates a little bit more awareness of how much the breath rate is our anchor. So if someone were to step on a stage and grab a mic, and that honestly brings up so much fear for people even just to visualize like, oh God, I'm going to be looked at by 40 people or 100 people. When you have that moment, you either become paralyzed by the adrenaline or you learn how to leverage that adrenaline. And every good performer, every good athlete learns how to take that adrenaline and elevate themselves to it. And to me, it's a trained response. First, you have to get used to adrenaline being dumped in your system. Then you have to open the body tension and you have to drop the breath rate. That allows your whole system to vasodilate. And really, we're not going into the systems if we're just talking about the biology of the body. Like, yes, the body opens, but so does your awareness. And I think performers have a really good concept of this. Like when people are looking at you, there's more energy and attention. And it's up to you to hold that energy and attention. A good entertainer can take that energy and attention and give it back to you. And I find that the best entertainers, the best performers are the ones that are up there in a state of service. They're not up there for themselves, like glomming up the energy. They're there to serve. They're there to like bring a great remembrance, a great memory to that person. So I think the place that I always start with people is like the foundation of what's controlling the voltage and how we can use the breath to tailor that voltage. And then body tension is basically, tuning our major fascia bands, the collagen fibers within us, and really the collagen even in our bones, to open to this new influx of voltage. And I know voltage is something that we don't often talk about with the body, but it's really, that's what my training is all about. It's how do we handle voltage and turn ourselves into lightning when we need to be,
Oh, I love it. And I want you to share with the audience, for people that have never discovered your work or how you're speaking, we'll go through the trajectory of how you even got so enamored in this field of breath and fascia with your golf and the opera singing and all of that, because I think that gives people an understanding of like, how did she get so good at communicating this and understanding this body in the way that you do? But I love the parts that you just said about slowing down and the shape of the breath. Those are things that you talked about and do talk about often. And I think in our culture, that is so big on, we promote and glorify and reward momentum, and we don't reward slowing down and letting go, and we look at it as laziness. And so a lot of people, including myself, for a lot of years, it took courage, I would say, to slow down and to feel. And I think that is what the breath does best. And that's what you're speaking to, is getting to that lower, slower breath and creating that relationship to the breath first, which is like if you're at your kid's game or driving or walking or biking or anything you're doing, I like to encourage friends and people I love to just start to pay attention to the fact that you are breathing first. And that in itself changes the breath in a way that's more natural and intuitive. And then it seems like most people are either holding or over breathing or mouth breathing or just unconsciously breathing. And I love that you speak to the 4 breaths a minute, because that is so true and so needed in our culture. We need the antidote to momentum. And so I think the breath awareness relationship piece is first. And then I love how you encourage people to slow down. And I tell people it takes courage to slow down, because that is where we have to contend with the truth about the nature of reality, about how we feel and the nervous system and all the uncomfortable stuff. And I love how you speak to sitting with the fascia, which we'll get into, and paying attention to it and being with it when it's uncomfortable, instead of tricking ourselves, which we're always subconsciously doing. So there's so much in it, but I want to go into a little bit of how you got here, because I remember hearing your story, but I'd love to share it with more people. So
it's a story of failure. I don't think my life has really made any sense until now. So I'm 35 and I just started musical breathwork probably 2.5 years ago, where I was really starting to see how these sequences were lining up. So between, my body pain that started when I was really, really young. I was born with an internally rotated right foot and a little bit of an abnormal upper cervical spine. I have 5 vertebrae, so there's a fusion that I deal with in my neck that I wasn't aware of till I was an adult, that created kind of a cascade of issues through my nervous system. So I grew up as a kid sensitive to my body, sensitive to my diet, kind of in an annoying way. My little brother was free of those qualms, had a 6-pack his whole life, never had digestive issues. And I was like learning to eat salads at 7, so that I wouldn't have like a bloated belly and I wouldn't feel constipated. I dealt with panic attacks, when I was just a little bit older, and then 10 years of nightmares, which is like very hard to explain to people what it's like to like live with a decade long of nightmares. I have so many dreams of dying. It kind of
wow.
changes you. I feel like in this lifetime, I've died thousands of times. I've watched myself die a bunch of
Wow.
ways. And I think there was a little bit of an initiation that happened during that time with who I am and what I'm actually doing. So I was like just learning how to play golf. I became rather introverted when the nightmares started. I was kind of extroverted in high school to a certain point, and then I just needed to go internal. I needed to kind of sit with there was a lot of confusing things happening in my family. My parents split up for a couple years. They're back together now and in love, which is amazing to see people grow.
Mm.
So I learned how to play golf after I learned how to play guitar. I was a pretty ambitious kid, so I had a lot of like hobbies, and I was kind of competitive in those hobbies. I really I just figured you smash as much stuff in your brain and see what happens. And by the time I was 18, I had just played golf for a couple years. I really wanted to play for this coach, Coach Joan Joyce. She was a World Hall of Famer in 4 different sports, and she was a coach right down the street, like 45 minutes away. And I applied for that college, and I basically talked myself onto the team. I like met up with the captain of the team during the summer, and I knew that there was this girl that had a scholarship that was kind of, really wishy-washy and burnt out. And I like knew that I could walk on to this like D1 team, and I did not have the scores. And I was able to kind of MacGyver myself on that team and then solidify a spot by just competing really hard and playing great and working harder than everybody around me. But during that time, I ended up sustaining a lot of injuries that were fascia related, and I didn't know
Mm.
that. So my right foot that was always internally rotated, when you carry a golf bag that's 30 pounds for 18 hours, you end up developing a bit of bursitis, which is just like an inflammation of the muscle. You have 3 muscles over the hip, so one of the muscles really inflames, and it kind of creates like pressure and tension. So I started to, in college, had to like navigate this like chronic injury that was like an old lady injury. I was like the only
Mm.
person going into the PTs with like having a very difficult time walking after tournaments. And both of my wrists, because you hit so many balls, and I'm 105 pounds. In college I got down to like 90 pounds. They would just kind of like take a toll. You hit 500 balls a day. So I was in the PT office a lot, trying to just kind of like get ready for training and not injure myself. And I learned from D1 programs, you have amazing people in the PT. You have all of the best stuff. And like even in an up and coming program like FAU was, we had like incredible access to things. And their rehab protocol was annoying. It was literally just stem and ice and heat, stem, ice, heat, stem, ice, heat. When that wore off, it was cortisone shots was the recommendation over and over. And that was not the route I wanted to go. I had already seen some of my older athletic friends get stuck in that slippery slope. So I started asking deeper questions, and I figured out a way to kind of just manage my pain.
Mm.
And we would joke in college, me and the athletes that were like a little bit older than me would be like, man, they're kind of setting us up for early onset arthritis. Cause like it was, how do you just keep performing? The recovery, there was no recovery. It was just, you're competing and you're practicing for tournament. There was, outside of a foam roller, there was literally no focus on recovery.
Wow.
And that was kind of eye-opening. And then to realize that the pros are very similar in a lot of ways. And as I've gotten closer to pros, not only in golf, but with a whole bunch of other sports, really the PT programs are very similar to what I was exposed to. So my last year of college, I had been training for 7 years to turn pro. The last month is very important because those are the scores that you take to your sponsors. I had 5 friends pass away. And that felt like a very trippy experience for me. I'd kind of developed PTSD when people would call me twice. I was like heart fluttering, thinking someone died. And you're pretty
Mm.
invincible at 21. The last thing you're thinking about is like a spiritual existential crisis of like who you are and the part that you have to play in the world. You're kind of just like, oh, life is so fun and we're becoming adults and we're making choices. And then I kind of felt like I was right up against like, what the hell am I doing here?
Mm.
And it was good. I think it was good for me spiritually. It was really intense at the time to go to like the kid I kissed for the first time ever in my life, like to go to his funeral. And we were the
Wow.
2 pros that graduated from high school. Like he was a pro soccer player. I was a pro golfer. So out of, the 1,200 kids in our class, I mean, Houston
Jeez.
was someone that I really like had a ton of respect for. And then he lost his life on a motorcycle accident, and you go and you're just kind of like shocked. And then the very next week, the kid that I grew up with on the bus that sat right next to me, like he died. And
Wow.
then the next week, and it was kind of like, whoa, is this ambush of spiritual and emotional energy. And I guess the long story short would be that my last time I played golf on that level, I let go of the attachment. And there was this like sense of peace. I remember looking at my parents, and I had kind of shot myself in the foot for the tournament, and I had just kind of let go, like, wow, let me just enjoy this. And then I made every putt on the back nine. I made like 6 birdies. It was beautiful. It was like, but there was no stress, and it was like this removal of the competition. It was very interesting to witness. It was like, wow, you know, my mind was holding me back. My mind, my attachment to the outcome was this kind of sabotaging way. And when I released it, when I was just here in a state of presence and joy, I just made everything. And it's like our nervous system is that responsible party for how in flow we are. And that's just an experience I've never talked about on a podcast before, and like something that really comes to mind when I think about, you know, tailoring our nervous system. So I ended up quitting golf. I remember like 3 months later, I was in a gambling match, and I was just kind of done. I was kind of burnt out, and I was really just sitting with like, who is Brooke, and like, why does this little white ball matter? And like, how am I going to make the world a better place if I just focus on, you know, golf? And it was a few short years later, I kind of spiraled into a depression through my grief, which I think was good, just part of the journey. And I met my ex-husband, who was a doctor, and he introduced me to upper cervical chiropractic, where I found out about my neck, and I learned a lot about the nervous system and how, you know, this electrical component is really important to how we experience life, how our cells stay alive. I was exposed to like hundreds of hours of medical lecture. We built an education company together called Pure Life Health Centers. We had a beautiful and graceful divorce. He was ready for a family and I wasn't. So there's so much respect in how we left each other. There's so much love in how we left each other. He has a beautiful family now. And it was like after the divorce, I started a band because that's what I wanted to do all the time. And you get a little brave after a divorce, you know, you're like, I'm going to do the thing I've always been afraid to do. And I met this incredible rock star, Rustin Gross. He's like one of the biggest metal drummers in the world. But he also plays like 25 other instruments. So between the two of us, I play 7. And so the two of us developed a musical, like it was a band called Enter the Stargate. And we would take people on journeys. So we had like a set that was a 7-minute Indian set. So he would play the sitar and I would play the tempura and the harmonium. He would play then we would go to Ireland and I would play the harp and he would play the bouzouki tuned into a Greek scale. We had a Japanese set and he would play, I would play the guchang and he would play the shamisen, which is like a hysterical tiny little instrument with like the weirdest pick you've ever seen. He could we both could shred on the Russian balalaika for a period of time. We would make these like funny little bear songs. So we took people on like journeys through the instruments and it was such a cool like show. It took forever for us to like load in and load out. It became a real sequence for us packing the car with so many instruments.
Wow.
But we noticed that, you know, the standard band in America is composited of the same 5 instruments. So our job was to take those 5 instruments and throw them in the garbage and then to take people on an international journey of like microtonal sounds. And instead of them looking at us and talking together, which was always a grand annoyance for us, it's like you perform a show and nobody really listened. So we performed in yoga studios. We would lay people out on mats and like, I think my biggest source of pride is that people would come like heavily, heavily meditated or on drugs to our shows. And they're like, I am here to vibe. I am here to listen. And they would just lay out. And often we'd have them look at the ceiling and there was no like applause. There was no clapping between songs. So for 90 minutes, we just set this soundscape that would take everybody on a journey. And I learned there that the same adrenaline I experienced during golf would reappear as a singer. And like, if you miss a belt, like I would sing so loud in this like other language. And I'm the only one that me and my partner would know if I missed the note, but really nobody else would hear, but you still have to recover, take that next breath and then hit it. So the internal reference of adrenaline as a golfer was reframed. And it made me kind of like deal with it differently. And I was like, wow, I can train for these moments. So I had been teaching breathwork at that time for about 5 or 6 years. But when we were on tour, I didn't have time for 45 minutes. So I started to kind of get really efficient about how I would train between shows. And I really ironed out this like 10-minute protocol that was just money. It would get me and him ready for singing. It would clear us out. It got everything expanded. It would kind of reset stuff. So that was kind of information. And then I ended up hurting my foot. And so in between tours, I remember I was sprint training and I got to a point where I was like, man, my left foot is just really a problem. I called my naturopath and I'm like, Bernie, people are saying I'm old now. And I'm like, I'm not ready to be old. I still want to train like I'm a professional athlete. And so I went down and saw him. He's like, you don't have a foot problem. It's plantar fasciitis, standard stock plantar fasciitis. He's like, you have a shin problem. And he's like, it's in your fascia. So when he said the word fascia, I was shocked that I had never heard of that body part before. I'm like, you're telling me there's a whole system that I've literally never even heard of. And I kind of prided myself, like I was really studying lymphatics before lymphatics was normal. So when he said fascia, I went online, I purchased, I think it was like $600 worth of textbooks. And I was like, I'm going to know everything I need to about this invisible rubber band system. And it kind of shocked me because as a golfer, we talk about the kinetic link system, like how the lower body and upper body are connected. And when you go into your backswing for like, I'm training for World Long Drive next year. So I can fly the ball 260 at sea level, which if we were to be in Colorado, which is where they host the World Long Drive Championships, that 260 would turn into about 320, 340 before roll. Which is where I need to be to contend. And so in that training, like to hit the ball far, we actually use the word rubber band. And when you torque your upper body against your lower body, you're seeking your maximum tension between your flexibility. That's all fascia. It's the spiral line of the major fascia bands. So in golf, we're training our major fascia lines. And there's all these like hip issues and knee issues that we develop as golfers that all of a sudden made complete sense. And I'm just like, wow, I'm so happy I'm getting into this fascia stuff. It's really going to affect my golf game. And I train so seldom now. And I still go out and play with my dad and brother a few times a year. And they are so angry at how amazing I can still stripe the ball. And I'm like, you guys, it's all about tension. So I've been playing with these different ways to use golf training with fascia in mind. So I train like a ballerina. I always have, like I use a mirror and tape to find these things, but I never focused on tension. And now that I'm trying to hit the ball really fucking far, when I'm going through my ballerina moves, I'm like, wow, I can feel how I'm hitting the major tense points. My team and I are actually developing a sculpture right now. I found a tensegrity artist at the Fascia Congress this year. This is Project X. This is one of the first tensegrity models. Me and my uncle replicated a few years ago. And when we think of, this lower body and upper body torque, if we think of this top part as our upper body and the lower part as the hips, when we start to generate torque as a golfer, we're changing all of the major fascia bands to what we call coil. And we're creating this like lax in one part and this super stretch in the other. And then we use our feet to drive the change. So like a good kinetic link swing, you never feel your upper body. The upper body is just moving. The upper body is just moving like a rubber band untwisting. So you kind of you like lose control and then you trigger it from the base. I don't know if I answered your question, but that's where I'm at.
I love it. Yeah. And the only thing that I think you missed that I really liked hearing about was your first singing teacher. And that's how you got into opera and all of that, and how that really taught you a lot of the foundations of breath. I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
When I was in public school, in middle school, so sixth grade, I entered into choir, and we had such a blessing. Mr. Gonzalez was our choir teacher, and he did an extraordinary job at making us incredible singers, but teaching us the breath. And he made it so fun to learn how to diaphragmically breathe and to sit upright and to learn how to belt. It was incredible how he made a non-competitive yet safe, expressive environment for a bunch of 12-year-old girls and a handful of boys, and then made us competition worthy against high school. So we got to like fly around to New York, and core memory for me is like singing in these stone chambers of churches, like getting ready with all of these people. It still kind of gives me goosebumps to think about, because I think a lot of old stone churches are like cymatic structures. They're built for the acoustical experience. And when you're a trained singer with 40 other trained singers in those rooms and your instructor says, amp it up, I mean, the whole building shakes. It's like a really incredible feeling. So that was my first experience with like singing. And then I think that he did such a good job with teaching us how to belt, that you became a little ballsier as like compared to a normal folk singer. I remember when I first picked up a guitar and played, I sounded like Taylor Swift. Like it was just like nice little songwriting songs that were kind of like folky and like cute, And my dad is a rocker. So the first concert I ever went to was AC/DC. I was 12. My dad took me like seventh row center. I high-fived Brian Johnson during Rock and Roll Ain't Noise Pollution. And my dad says like he like passed the torch to me. So I would sing AC/DC and Led Zeppelin. I'm like a big fan of Judas Priest. I'm a big fan of Symphony X, which is like huge rock and roll ballads. And to sing those type of songs, like Ronnie James Dio, one of the singers of Black Sabbath and Heaven and Hell, he is a very professionally trained operatic singer. So to hit these loud belting noises consistently without injuring your voice requires a lot of training. So when I started to sing rock, I was like, oh wow, I'm actually like, I can do this. Like I know how to like dig into my body and sustain the note. So Mr. Gonzalez, I will forever be indebted to him to really just making me fall in love with the power of the breath and like how to not just push notes. And it's only expanded now. And now that I roll with other singers, every single person has a different way of teaching the breath. And because I've trained with opera singer and metal people and rappers, there is a real practice of your inhale and exhale in live versus recording. And that's like something you don't really figure out until you're with an opera singer on a mic and they're like, oh, wait, no, that's how I breathe. And it's like, oh, no, you have to breathe through the nose so that the mic doesn't pick it up like for that, that 1 second, and then you start to belt again. So there's a lot of subtlety in the pro artist field where breath is still not taught as a shape. And the metal people like Melissa Cross, she's one of the biggest teachers ever for the rock and rollers, for the metal screamers, for the fry voices. She's all about using the intercostals like an accordion. But when you train with opera singers, it's all about using the diaphragm and the pelvic floor as a means to throw the sound up through the chamber of the body. And it's like by flirting in the throat singers, they have their own way of relaxing into that lumbar part and really like holding the resonance through the chest. So everybody has their own kind of style of how they've mastered creating stability within the vibration of sound. And live singers versus recording singers and recording coaches have very different angles. And so I'm just continuing to learn. And recently in the last year, I've started studying with some free divers, pros that go down, 140 plus feet under the water. And how the lung tissue changes with that kind of pressure is very interesting to look at. So like doubling capacity for a free diver means something very different than for a singer. For a singer, that might be holding a belt for 35 seconds instead of just 20. And 20 is a long belt, but like we can get to 35 seconds, no problem. And then a free diver, that may look like being able to move, but holding your breath for 2 minutes while you're moving. so exploring all of these different types of how we can train the breath to stabilize ourselves for whatever adrenaline we're going through, I think is so fun. Mr. Gonzalez started it all.
I love that. Yeah, there's so many little notes I've been taking in that Enter the Stargate. Do you guys still perform or do anything together? And I'm curious, like, what instruments you do play.
So Rustin got a really good gig in Germany or in Europe. So he's been traveling Europe with a couple metal bands for the last about 9 months. And we've been kicking around an album during that time. So he squeezes me into his very busy travel schedule, and business has really taken off. So it was something that, we went from gigging, 4 times a month to now it would be really nice to do kind of a couple shows a year. So I'm happy that his other bands have really, upped him. It's just been growth on both sides. To me, we're not done yet. We have not. The world has not seen the best of Enter the Stargate at this point. So
Yeah.
I play the first instrument I learned how to play was the guitar. Then I learned ukulele. Then I learned piano. And then in the last few years, I've learned harp, tempura, harmonium, and I'm definitely forgetting something.
Any wind instruments? It seems like you might play some.
Outside of harmonica, and I'm like, I wouldn't really call myself a harmonica player. I play harmonica to the raccoons, and they show up and I feed them bananas. So I don't know if I could like really play a song anymore on harmonica, but I do enjoy it. But no, I'm a singer. So like when I play my instruments, I really play to sing. So there's a lot of people that are better than me at guitar, and the guitar players. There's people think they're good, and then you're around like the metal musicians that I've been around. You're like, oh, I kind of suck. I can run through my scales, but they can do it at 150 BPMs. So it's always kind of humbling when you hang out with certain people. You're like, yeah, I can play it, but like I can't play it like they can play it.
Yeah, I love the way that you described how you created the space though for the journeys. I've been to a couple like East Forest journey sessions where everybody's laying down, and I just appreciate that so much more, where it's an inner experience, but everybody collectively is joining in. And then Parangi, different artists that do the same type of thing, but with different instruments and different singing. I wish all concerts were set up like that, where you could just chill out, lay down, whatever medicine you want to be on, if any, and then you go for a ride, because typical concerts are just revolved around drinking and standing. And
Yes.
like you said, it's just like we need to reinvent the way that music is played. And then the spaces, like I wish they would take Buckminster Fuller's ideas and create all geodesic dome structures, because or something like you said, the ancient churches and temples, because they're all built for vibration and frequency. And now we just live in this weird devolved world where architecture is like devolving, and it should be the most advanced. So it's very strange to see how the human, right now, we think we're in like the most enlightened ages, but I think we're in the dark ages, because we've gotten so far removed from our connection to nature. And so the things we're building and creating are all mind linear based, instead of like vibration, all the stuff that the ancients knew with the big giant monuments that they created. So I think we've lost our connection to our ancestors, and we're a bit disconnected in that way.
So I don't know if you've heard this story, but I lived in a teepee for a year. It was the first year that me and my husband were married. We were so broke. He was like such an amazing doctor that I saw only the good. I was just like, don't worry,
Sure.
I am capable of much. We will figure it out together. And we couldn't afford our rent. Everything went it back into the business. And I was like, well, fuck it. Let's live in a teepee. My parents have a few acres that we could throw it on. And for a year, we lived in a teepee. And I got to tell you, I don't think I've ever really returned to it. This circular conical structure with an opening to the stars changed my sleep and changed my eyesight. Like after the first 4 months, I could kind of see in the dark compared to everybody else I was around. I could see in the dark because I was exposed to such intense darkness around new moon in the teepee, because we had no electricity in there. And we still had access to like a normal bathroom. So like nobody would know that we lived like savages. We slept like savages because we'd wake up and go to work and put shoes on and put a pretty dress on. And like everybody else, we would go and function. But when we would come back home, we were outside for,
Wow.
15 hours. So it'd be like the last 3 hours of the night and the whole time you're sleeping until you go to work the next morning. But my ears would change. The first month, it was kind of hard because you're kind of picking up on a bunch of new sounds, but then they get cataloged in your unconscious. And things that used to frighten you now become geolocation of everything that's outside of your tent. So your ears become like hyper open. The wind becomes this like constant blanket. It became very awkward to go inside of a house for like, more than 45 minutes. And it was within the first 30 seconds. Like if I was blindfolded, I would know that I was in a house because it's like, where did the wind go? I don't feel something brushing my skin. I remember at some point just like laughing. I'd cross it. I'd like walk by a bush out in the wild, like out where all of us go to a grocery store. And something as simple as the lizards scurrying within the bushes next to me. I remember this one time my brain was like, there's 9 lizards to the right of me. And I was like, wow, brain, that was such an interesting piece of data that like literally doesn't matter. I'm not hunting for food. But it was like my perception of the world shifted. The grass was my carpet. The sky was my ceiling. I was one with the earth, and everybody was living in these tiny little container structures in these tiny little microclimates, which separated you. And since then, I've done a number of different outside experiments. I did a whole summer in a kind of like a wigwam. It was a screened in. I did 6 weeks in a bell tent, a Norwegian bell tent. So I'm really into biogeometry and the fact that like square structures are not good energetic flows. They're not good air flows. There's stagnant air within buildings, which, can create a multitude of issues. And then our skin stops sweating. So we're always blocking the sweating process with our little AC units. And it's like, that's one of the best ways to restore health is to like get the stagnant water out. So, I love going camping. Like to me, if I don't camp 6 weeks out of the year, it's like, what am I doing with my life? I need to like purge from the electricity and like purge my ears from the static load of a low grade speaker or like an air filter or the AC. Like our ears need so much more than that to kind of come back and fire online.
Yeah. And I bet do you believe then that we've just lost our capacity to have things like telepathy and remote viewing, these things that seem so unscientifically understood, but yet our ancestors, it was so normal. Even if you go to the jungle, the people there it's a normal conversation about telepathy. That's just a normal feature of being human. And I think that we're just so bombarded with electromagnetism and all this non-native EMF and the wrong buildings, and just again the way that we're indoctrinated to think about the nature of reality changes our capacity to be fully human.
I don't think we're dulled out to it. I think that we have numbed it to maintain a sense of control of stimulation. But to activate it, we just come back to silence and stillness. And to me, that silence and stillness to me is trainable because like I want to learn how to be open to the subtle nuanced information during life, right? But if somebody has been disconnected from that feeling since they were a kid, something like a dark retreat, no medicine required, 3 days of darkness and silence, like you're going to activate some old powers. Even just taking, like I just did a medicine trip last week with one of my coaches, and it was her first time ever being in an elevated state, like such a pure little angel soul. And I got some of the I hope this is okay that I mentioned this.
Right?
Oh yeah. You're a
Half
wonder
of my
junkie.
Podcasts they're about psychedelics. So yeah, go for it.
So I sourced from like a very beautiful space, really good psilocybin. And I wanted her to expand into the holy spaces with comfort. That was my goal. I was like, I want you to want to do this. I was coached up on the Red Road 4 times a year. We activate ourselves with our oversoul and we have a conversation. There's so many choices we have to make. We want to make sure we're making choices in alignment with our soul. So this is the sequence that I was groomed by the medicine men that I am close to. So 4 times a year, solstices and equinoxes, You go up and you chat with your higher self. And my rule is that, like, nobody's driving. We're all going to stick together. We're going to be around a fire. No talking. And the no talking is so easy after the first couple hours because everyone's telepathic. You don't need words in that elevated state. There's so much information exchanged via the mind. So I don't think that those powers are dulled. I think that we keep them numb to keep the stimulation of our brain at a certain level, which is why pulling the brain out of beta is such an important practice. Dropping our breath rate to 4 breaths a minute pulls our brain closer to a relaxed theta state, which is where the neurons can crossfire, which is where the things, the abilities that we had as a child existed in that frequency. It's a non-linear way of thinking. It's a non-practiced way of thinking. And somebody like Dr. Edith Ubuntu, who runs the Luminary School out of California, who's teaching kids to blindfold vision, she has 200 kids now that blindfold read. And I was able to really watch, like, her son play chess blindfolded not like 4 months ago. And she's having a hard time with the parents that are stuck. And she's like, I'm activating it in the kids, but she's like, I'm struggling with getting the science in front of these people. So I'm developing a new talk really for her called Intuition in the Body Instrument. And how, when, like, I take my harp, right? If I take my harp and it's properly tuned and I put it outside in the wind is going to play the music. And, like, there's a lot of really cool myths around, like, the harp that makes its own sound. And I see the body as that. When the body is out of tune and the breath rate is too high, the wind can't play it because there's too much action, there's too much tension. But if we create balance and fluidity within the crystalline structure of the body and we drop the breath rate, we become open to the nuance of energy. So, for instance, if you're driving in your car and you're just kind of relaxed and then you feel like someone's looking at you and you look over and someone's looking at you, you're feeling the electromagnetic presence of their attention. And you're feeling that because you're aware of the magnetic tension in your field. So I think that's the easiest way I can describe it. But, like, if we keep thinking of our body as only what's within your skin, you're missing out on everything else that is presence, that is awareness, that is sensitivity, that is the subtle body, that is the energetic body. Like, why is it that we can feel when someone is angry or someone is happy? It's because there is a voltage charge to that off gassing. So if we were to take, like, an electrical device and read the skin, right? I'm going to use a salamander as an experience. Because I know those charges off the top of my head. If we were to put an electrical device on the skin of a salamander, it would run at negative 10 millivolts, right? If we were to cut that skin, it would run at negative 20 millivolts, meaning that the electrons are flushing to that area of wound, adding energy to it. Now, as that changes, as soon as that salamander starts to regenerate that skin, it's going to switch charges again, and it's going to become the opposite of that. And when it's fully healed, it's going to go back to that negative 10 millivolts, right? So our nervous system is operating through these electrical channels, and we can measure them and we can sense them, but we're still not breaking into the concept that they're actually extending our field. Like, our phone has an 8-foot field around it. So anything within the 8 feet of our phone is part of that magnetic field, which is why people say sleep with it in another room, sleep with your Wi-Fi in another room, because of the discharge of the electromagnetic field. But we are living, breathing, crystalline structures that are pushing this field. And this field changes. When we're weak, it's a little tighter to us. When we're strong as hell, it's way far away from us. And it's in the oscillation of this field that I think separates elite athletes from elite wannabes. how we control this dynamic field around us. I think celebrities are a good example. Why is it that some celebrities, they're not the most beautiful, they're not the most talented, yet they hold this like dynamic, confident charge? You want to be around them. What is that? That's their electromagnetic field. That takes, people say it's confidence, but I don't think it's confidence. I think it's presence. And it's how present are you? How charged up are you? How much can you add to the field? Are you adding to the field? Are you taking away from the field? Are you sucking the energy into yourself? I'm painting with a big brush here, but I hope that
I
outlines some
love this
things.
brush you're painting with. It's covering so much because I love like Robert Becker's work, which it sounds like some of this stuff stems from like Gerald Pollack's work. I've had Gerald on the podcast, and I've been really diving into this light water magnetism component of the human experience. And I like what you said in the other podcast about Wayne Dyer and how you didn't even know who it was, but you could feel this charge on this man. And I've met people like this in my life where they're just people, but they're vibrating at a certain frequency and a certain radius because of their presence. I met this guy named Don Howard. He ended up living with me, and he had cultivated so much stillness and presence and awareness, like you're saying, that he and his sister too, Sanchiretta, she's this amazing, person. I can't even call her a person sometimes because I'm like, what is she? She's so amazing. Some people would call her a Zen master, but she would never call herself that. But when she's with you, she's looking at you, but you're feeling this presence that makes you cry. I mean, it's amazing. So much love is vibrating from this woman. And so to be around people that have actually worked from the head to the heart center and to be in their field, there's not a person alive that doesn't feel that. And then as a first responder, I've been in some weird places for 20 years. Like you go into some dark spaces where the energy of the field is, someone just got killed, or you go into rooms where something just crazy happened and they called the number that you called to have help come. And that's when we show up and it's like, whoa, what just happened here? And when you're young, I was never taught about the breath or awareness or mindfulness or any of these terms. I was just thrust into it. And so over the years, I started to want to understand what you're talking to. And you're doing the broad strokes, which I love. And we can dive deeper into all of this because there's a lot of science behind it too, which I don't always need. I'd rather practice the things that work and that intuitively we know from old, downloads. And we're much older than we think. We've come through many birth canals to get here. I always tell people that remember your older, deeper self, right? It's not like you just pop out of a birth canal and all of a sudden you get programmed by your culture and that's you. That's the illusion of you. You're an essence. We're all like so much older than we think. And I think a lot of what you're talking to is just reminding people to remember what we are. And you do such an amazing job of speaking to so much of this stuff. You have a lot of depth to you and a lot of ability to communicate. And that's what I love about how you're speaking here. I would love to know what you think about when you were talking about the Teepee, because I've heard it's actually one of the most advanced structures ever created as far as the way that it's shaped and the whole thing behind it. It's still one of the most advanced structures that's ever been created, and you lived in it. And the moon energy, you were talking about new moon energy, and it's something I'm curious to because I worship the sun now. I make sure I'm up for every sunrise. I love being in the sun as much as possible, being outside as much as possible. But the moon is something I don't have the relationship to quite as much, other than on plant medicines where I'm like just enamored with tears of joy and awe and like, whoa, the moon blew my mind like 3 times to the point where I couldn't even get up. But describe the moon a little bit to me and what you think about what it did to your eyes. And maybe I just want you to sort of explore the moon a little bit with me.
I want to, before I do that, I just want to let you know, being a first responder, I think is like being the first angel that arrives on the scene of hell. And I have these like dreams often that like when things are wild, if you just laugh, like through my 10 years of nightmares, I develop this way to move through these like rooms of hell with laughter, kind of like maniacal laughter. And often in my dreams, I would be linked to like 2 of my friends And there'd be like a murder scene, and we would laugh hysterically through the room, and like it felt like we were using laughter and almost like laughing in the face of danger kind of energy, to clean it up. And it's funny because I kind of think that mindset is needed in our world right now. Our world could use like laughing in the face of danger energy. So I really
I
respect
agree.
what it takes to like show up and then to de-escalate a situation and then to transform it back into like a home. I think like what you are doing there, could really like, I'm sure that's a main focus of like helping other first responders deal with the headspace of you open a door and you kind of feel like you walked into a state of hell. And I use that word as a state of frequency. Like I see a really big blockade in a lot of people that love religion, where it's like, oh, there's heaven and then there's hell. And it's like, oh, actually, those are just two musical notes on a piano. And there's all of these other frequencies in between. And learning how to make hell into heaven requires moving through these frequencies. And the faster we do it, the more we can recover. So, like, hell often is a chaotic state, which can be embodied in a room or in a car when things are underloved, underappreciated, and dismissed. You start to create a frequency field that we would identify hell as. And heaven could be order, structure, love, everything in its place, little casitas. It's like your things are happy, your books are dusted. Angels have access. I think cleaner energy forms have access to you when everything is structured and ordered. And it's very difficult to feel that other realm when things are chaotic. It's almost like noise and dissension here. So first responders to me are the ones that enter hell first to start to change the frequency. So I'm very happy that you're into this work, because I know that like the level of suicide in firefighters alone is like, it's the way firefighters die is through suicide. So speaking about it from a masculine way and disseminating this information is so very cool. I just wanted to notate that about the moon.
Yeah, no, thank you.
The moon has a very different beam of light than anything else kind of in the world. So like if we were to go outside with a thermometer and stand in the sunshine would make it hotter. If we stood in the shade, it would be cooler, right? In the moon, if we stand in the moonlight, it's going to be colder. If we stand in the shade of the moonlight, it's going to be warmer. So it has this reverse effect on us. And it really, like, there's some wonderful experimentation with the moonlight for removing inflammation from the body. But the way that I view the moon as a, someone who lived in a teepee for a while, was it became more of a calendar for us. And it became a more obvious calendar in how people would change. So at new moon, the way I like to describe the energy, right? Because the moon is a giant magnet. The moon's a magnet that affects the water of all of our bodies and our earth. So when we have new moon, which is when it's dark, it's invisible, and we have the greatest amount of sunshine or starlight. So when we have new moon, we have all of this starlight, which is my favorite. But also the magnetism is very relaxed. And I would compare that to if we were all standing in like a 4-foot pool of water. We can all stand up in it. We can all have a chat. There's, nobody's splishing and splashing around in the water. We don't have to tread water. We're all just here. Then at full moon, the way that I would describe it is it's like we're all in 10 feet of water. And everybody is kind of treading water. They're getting tired. They may be like kind of latching onto you for help. There's this magnetism that's alive within everyone around full moon. We're a little more angsty. We're often not as good at communicating. We're often not as still or as silent. There seems to kind of be like too much energy. Whereas new moon is very relaxed. There's almost like an exhaustion or a state of ease that everybody is in. We have like less energy. So living with the moon that intimately, I think just reminds us of the polars. I've read a lot of very interesting science books about the moon. One of them written by these two physicists that is called Who Built the Moon? And they look at it as, why does our moon not rotate like every other moon out there in the galaxy. There's no rotation on its axis. And why is that? It's very interesting. So, as the native part of me would say, like, oh, I just love her, and like she is a polar of the sun and she helps kind of remove these ions. And then the logical intellectual side is like, really, like, why does the moon kind of act the way it acts? And I have a lot of questions about the moon. But it is, to me, the sky in general is it's our original television. So to just go and lay, like if I'm crashing out, if I'm at an extended space, psychically, emotionally, physically, my go-to is laying on my patio or my driveway and just staring at the sky until it makes sense. Whether that be midday, middle of the night. Our sky is the original television screen, and like taking our problems to that and then allowing time and space to lapse. The original version of divination, right, which is an old way of praying and getting to know our intimate nature before we had religion, before we had a priest that you could go to or a shaman that you would go to. You would divinate by, there's this word called scrying, and scrying is a way of relaxing your eyes on a natural object and allowing your unconscious to project images. You do this with clouds. We all did this as kids with cloud, like, oh, the cloud is in this shape. A lot of like priestesses and priests would do it with bodies of water. Traditionally there'd be a crystal ball, is how like people think of a witch. But bodies of water, the sky itself, a candle flame is like a very ancient Indian meditation of like staring at a flame. All of that has to do with getting intimate with what's surfacing within ourselves and giving time and space to it. To me, I love the sky because I almost feel like my field can open all the way up versus like if you have a flame in front of you, it's kind of like your whole energy is so small and so kind of suffocated and tunneled into one little thing. If I just focus on the sky, it kind of feels like there's room for all of my feelings, all of my mess, all of my whatever to kind of open. And it's just like, okay, sky, tell me what's up today. This is how I'm feeling. It's almost like a therapy session, but in the most ancient way, just chatting with the sky for a little while. The moon's got some answers. The sun's got some answers. The stars has some answers.
Did you call it scrying?
Yes.
SC or SK?
SC. Are you
Okay,
familiar
I
with
wrote
that
it
word?
down. I had never heard the word, but I am familiar with the practice because I've explored it quite deeply, especially when I was sitting under psilocybin under the moon or with the ocean, anything. And I love
Yeah.
just gazing, and you see so much appear. And I've even seen the moon turn into like 4 moons, and then it was just spiraling and it drops down. And a lot of times the stars can drop down so close, and you can understand how the ancients would map the cosmos without
Mm-hmm.
telescopes. And a lot of people are like, yeah, right. But I've talked to recently this year, I've had some of the best neuroscientists and physicists, and I love exploring that piece too, because you're like, what have we discovered with the mind and with our modern tools and technology and mathematics? And it's fun to hear these brilliant people speak, but 99.9% of them have never, ever had an altered state of consciousness, and they're terrified to explore it. And I'm always so curious. I don't shame them or criticize. I'm
Yeah.
more curious, like, what is that about the people that are so incredibly intelligent with the mind, but I think from what they usually say is they're worried about disturbing their state. They're worried that they will
Mm.
lose
Lose
something.
something.
And
Yeah.
I say, well, it's good because it's true. When you go to Japan, you come back, you can't ungo to Japan. You're different because you saw a different culture, language, and you
Mhm.
are different. And so you went on a trip, you came back, and now you're a different being and you expanded. And so I always tell people maybe you shouldn't, but it just blows my mind how the lack of curiosity is always on the subjective level, the existential piece from the people that are spending. I mean, this last guy I talked to, he's 85 and he's known as like the Newton and Einstein of the mind. And he said he would never do a psychedelic. And it's like, how interesting,
Mm.
because psychedelics, as much as we've been demonizing them and we've had this sort of war on consciousness for the last couple thousand years, it's been in symbiotic relationship to us for all of human history. It's like doesn't mean that everybody should do it or that they're going to make you enlightened or wiser, but it sure is something that I think has created the lack of the architecture that you're talking to and the relationship to nature. And for someone that wants to have a conversation about it, they can't have a conversation about it until they've done it, unfortunately, because it's that profound. I tell people, if you just sit alone in nature and you eat something that grows out of the earth, it will blow your mind. And it will remind you that everything around you is so much wiser and older and more intelligent than you've ever conceived of. And that all of your conditioning and programming and everything you thought you knew is pretty much bullshit. And you sort of do have to step away from it and lose that ego component. You don't want to throw it away, but it's very humbling and daunting, and it's terrifying. And then you have to rebuild with what's left, which is not much, and go back to seeking the truth, which you experienced at such a young age because of all those dreams of death, the initiatory experiences you were having, and then your 5 friends dying. So you were butting up against the existential components that you can't measure with the scientific tools that we have.
Yeah. I did my first ayahuasca experience at 18. So I was like
Wow.
nurtured. So from 18 to 19, I probably did like 8 trips, which felt like a recentering. It was once a month. And I did it very sequentially. Like I did it with a detox before and a protocol after. And I did it with shamans, you know what I mean? So I think I was really nurtured. I think some people that don't have access to those kind of guides, it's scary. And like,
Yeah.
maybe it's better that it's scary to them until like the right avenues open up. So, I mean, I've probably sat with Aya now, 17 times over the last 15 years, and mushrooms probably another 30 times. And I think always ceremonially, which I kind of, urge people, if you have the itch, be coached up and like do it in a sacred setting, do it in a sacred way. Because, people taking these medicines at like a music festival where they think it's cool or it's easy to get a hold of, well, you're also incredibly overstimulated. So you're not going to have an internal experience. You're going to just be surviving. So maybe you and I needed to meet the people that we met to branch into that operation and to explore. I always think that, like, man, I wish everybody would do medicine and feel the elevator that our consciousness is on, because the patterns that we see when we're on psilocybin exist right now, but our
Yeah.
brain is filtering out what's necessary and unnecessary. So the way that the leaves look as the winds pass through them, it's not important to our conscious mind that's busy, doing other things. But when we're in that state and we're open and we see the concert, we see
Yeah.
how all of the patterns are fitting together, which is why the old seekers and warriors would take these medicines to enhance their ability to hunt. And I remember it probably took me like 10 or 12 trips to be able to move my body during these times of thing, like during elevated states. It's like the body feels very like sluggish and stuck. And I think most people that feel that way, but I kind of I move a lot when I'm, after I do kind of my sitting and I drop into that state. I want to pull that level of voltage into my tissues. And you can imagine like old school warriors like spinning a bamboo stick in these elevated states of mind, just honing their perception. And that's how I see the medicine is like, as a seeker, when I go into those altered states of consciousness, I am honing my awareness of the grand connection between everything. And like I call it the God zone, where you've taken like a nice dose, you're set, the energy is good, the heavens are open, as Terence McKenna would say, like go up to see if the heavens are open or if the gates are locked. So like when the heavens are open, I feel like I connect to my breath is the same breath that is in the clouds. It is the same breath that is with the stars. My consciousness and the stars are one, and they're dialoguing. So everything that I need to learn from the universe is just me and the stars having a conversation over the next 4 hours. And the stars are going to show me everything I need to gather to make the best choices for the next 4 months. And it doesn't show me my whole chart. Like, it doesn't show me where I'm going to end up when I'm an old woman. It shows me what I need to make the choices that are present. And then coming back into the body to me is so difficult, and the reason why I think a lot of people, choose to do it when they're kids and then not as they're adults, because that smushing all of what you are back into a biological little freaking suit is like such an intense experience, because like you're aware of all of these things within your body, and the body's not a comfortable place for a big soul. Yeah, and I think that is probably why people, they do it and they're like, oh, it's not for me. And it's like, yeah, like I know. It's like you're stretching into the cosmos and then you're pulling it all here and then integrating it. I think it's built for people willing to do that kind of work. Um, and I know other
Yeah.
people that have kind of gotten around it, like Dr. Edith. She does silent and dark retreats. So she doesn't like, she's a mom. She's got a little paranoia with doing medicine. So she has found her own route into the transcendental states. So it doesn't mean that we need medicine to get there, but I think getting there is the really important part, taking that time to touch base with our soul.
Yeah. No, I love all of what you just said. And also, I don't encourage people to do it now because of the lack of elders and initiatory experiences. And where would someone do it where they're going to have the right container and the integration piece? How are they going to come back to work in a insane society? Once you realize what's beyond the veil, now you have to spend the rest of your life. If you're busy raising kids and trying to work and keep your head above water and you have to be in the matrix, you don't have time to now go do what I did, because I don't have kids and I did have 20 days off a month, thank God. And I was able to land the ship and spend my life reverse engineering what was going on. And when I had those initial big experiences, to then listen to lectures and read the books. I have libraries full of books on consciousness, and I've been floating in float tanks for 15 years. It's like, that's not a normal life. And I've even realized maybe my mother shouldn't eat the mushroom and blow her mind at this point. She's 73 or whatever. And my father too, he's a conservative Christian guy, and the guys at work they're amazing guys that when shit hits the fan, I want those guys on my side. They can build things, fix things, shoot things. They know how to survive, and their nervous systems are ready for what's coming, and they have been doing this. Their archetypes are so powerful. So I'm always like respectful of the fact that we live in a time where we've lost access to certain components of our relationship to these things. But I stopped running around thinking everybody should eat these things, because it doesn't work out for a lot of people.
It's for
And
the
you get
shamans.
evangelical. It's for the shamans, and it's for the
Yeah.
seekers and the people that are truly curious. And there's just so much packed in there. And then with the psychedelic so-called renaissance, big pharma and all the investors and everybody now is promoting it in a certain container that's just disturbing, where you need to be diagnosed with some DSM model and promote victimhood and trauma and sit in a chair and, ruminate, instead of the awe and the wonder and the mystery and all of the beauty that went with it from the ancient elders that would teach it in that fashion and like blow your mind. That sometimes is useful, but now I'm like, I don't know that everybody should just go check boxes and sit in a fucking therapy office and have an eye mask on with some guy in the room that's not really trained, and he's putting his trauma into your subconscious mind. And that then you go into MK Ultra and you're like, this whole thing might be MK Ultra 2.0,
Okay, so you've gone down those rabbit holes too. I try to laugh
deep.
at it. It's like I try to take the eternal framework of like, okay, I'm just a 3,000-year-old soul. Here I am, lots of embodiments to get to. This is like my most healthy frame of mind to handle with the world that it is. And it's like, I've chosen such a little comfy place for myself. Like what most people want to set up for their kids, I get to live in. My parents live right next door. I'm on a 3-acre lot that I'm building a farm. We have electroculture
Cool.
everywhere, solar panels. I live so simply, but very eccentrically. Like my place is just full of instruments and gardening tools, and it's like I'm just like a painter, gardener, musician. And the education piece to me about this bridge between people thinking that we are just our cell structure, we're just the body, and coming into this electrical component, people that have done medicine can sense that. They can sense that the tree is not just a tree after you do medicine. You're connected to that tree. You and the tree are living on one field. You're actually the same atoms that are just recycling in and out of each other. And there's this sense of unity. But in our society, there's this sense of separatism. that is created. That's a total illusion. Like, we are not separate from each other. Even when we're competing with each other, it's hysterical to think of it as competition instead of inspiration. And that vantage point, I think, is like the work of the shamans. The work of people like you and I is to help people who are maybe too afraid to get into those places, to see it. Because, like you and I could sit back and say, wow, I couldn't imagine doing medicine and sitting on a Zoom call with a therapist and having to talk. That would take away, like, the idea of looking at my phone when I'm on medicine is like,
It's
because
appalling.
like, to hold my consciousness into such a small thing is like, you're going to miss out on all of this life. So I try to take the 3,000-year-old framework of, wow, this is such a chaotic time. And it's like, I picture this ocean wave that's like crashing onto the shoreline. And I live in Florida, right? So like the sand is made up of shells that have been masticated by the
Yeah.
waves. And it's through this, like, the sucking down and then that it like slowly gets chewed. The shells get chewed down into sand. And the chaos that we're existing in, I like playfully think of, I was like, we're just getting chewed up, like we're just getting thrown back on the sand and then scraped back up and then but we're in it. We're like zoomed in to just one lifetime within that wave of chaos. And it just seems crazy, but like, it's going to make sense. We are, as a humanity, we are pushing the edge of consciousness into a new area. And it's like, most people, they want to follow someone else, but the leaders are going to branch out into these like dark unknowns and the uncertain paths. And whoever's having the most fun is going to be what people follow. And right now there's so much chaos that there's like this retreat into religion that I see. It's like, it's so cute and it's so kind of predictable, like what our neurons do when they're uncomfortable. Like, oh my God, there's no safety and security. What do? Retreat to religion. And I'm a woman who has, mystical qualities, and there's kind of no space for me in religion. Like, outside of the Essene texts, I am known as a witch. And I'm not a witch. I am wielding only the power of goodness. Here, I'm tuning people back into their their physiology, and that naturally activates these powers that are latent within us. And I fear the retreat to religion because it is the same framework of saying, I have this power within me. I'm terrified of it. So I'm going to just look at these rules. I'm going to follow this sequence to make sure that I'm being a good person. And I think the flip side of it, and this is maybe like not going to be a popular thing to say, but I think I can say it to you quite freely. Ceremonial magic is the polar opposite of that. And I've been willing and able to look at ceremonial magic in a very neutral perspective compared to most people because of my open-mindedness with religion. And ceremonial magic at its very core is, you're saying that you are connected to this thing that we call universal energy or God, whatever word you like. And you are going to pull this universal energy into you. And then you are going to say to every cardinal direction the names of God. And you are going to anchor the names of God within your structure to every cardinal direction, and then above you and below you. And you are going to hold that feeling of God within your person. That, I think, is the framework that gives us our sovereignty back. But to do that, we can't really be in pain. And we got to be aware of our nuanced and subtle bodies. And we have to be willing to take back the power that the church really in the temples pushed outside of us. To go to connect to God, you don't need to go to a church or a temple. You need to go within. But that's not what the church and temples teach. That's what the real masters taught. But how do you make it sexy and playful to come back within in a state of chaos? That's really, like, literally, it's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to trick people into coming back to their sovereignty and then make intuitive decisions. So it doesn't mean like, oh, my courses will give you all of the answers forever. It's like, no, my courses will give you a fundamental outline of when your body says yes, when your body says hell no, and when your body says, let me think on that. Let me go talk to the sky for a little while. Let me give myself 20 minutes to just allow the patterns to wash over my eyes until the right answer comes. So I think the framework forward is we, as hilarious as this sounds, when we start questioning institutions, that's when people start to do medicine. And when people start to do medicine, you start to question even further. And the people that are not willing to question religion, I think, will get stuck in this framework of something outside of me knows better than me. If it's a
I
doctor, if
agree.
it's the
Yeah.
government, if it's the police, it teaches a framework of something outside of me knows better than me. Ceremonial magic makes you swallow all of that responsibility. And you can wield now this new wisdom with good and harmony and like trying to stay adjacent with your soul, or you can utilize it for what people think of as witchcraft or pulling things towards you that are not really meant for you. Because it does work. Spells do work. But the thing is the harmony of the universe works way more intensely. So you can manifest whatever you want. The universe will have a way of taking it away from you in a tragic way if it's not meant. So those are just my thoughts.
I love how you think. It's amazing. And I think I resonate with a lot of what you just said too, because the return to the religious fundamentalist thing that's happening, I can see it being like a mechanism of what you just described as like we need to retreat. But I also see it as a feature of the sophisticated psychological warfare tactics that have been used to keep us in an authoritarian model. And so I think there's just like I don't like to go down to like, well, there's these people in a dark room with cigarettes and they're all just planning. But there's some incredible sophistication and organization. And through these mechanisms, the medium is the message and the whole Brave New World thing, they are using weapons of mass distraction and programming. And they know how to divide and conquer. And that's what the people that are really intelligent and using the mind and they're worried about death, the transhumanists and all the globalists, this idea, which I'm not worried about either. I have this like, let's lean into it and have a good time while we're here. And let's also be of service. Like I think that I've learned in my lifetime, even through traditional real, whether it be firefighting and going into real situations, how to manage the nervous system and chaos and like being grateful that I have a nervous system that can be adaptable in real chaos and not being worried about death. But also in the psychedelic experiences where the thing gets so crazy and overwhelming and you're seeing the demonic, whatever you want to call, low vibrational thing just build up, and then you learn to smile and lean in and it just dissolves and you're like, holy shit. I love what Terence said about the feather bed. Nature loves courage, and if you lean into it, it'll lift you up and you'll realize the whole thing is a feather bed. It's something along those lines. But
Huh.
I think that the humor and the surrender is the most empowering thing, because you're trusting the process, like you said about the seashells, and you're remembering that like this thing is so much older and weirder than we'll ever be able to wrap our little monkey mind around. And once you get to contend with death, which I think I read this book, The Denial of Death by Ernest Becker, and I liked it a lot. But all of the old shamanic traditions and all of the practices were really built around some form of your relationship to life and death. And if you don't contend with it and you want to just suck down the story that your parents or your culture gave you without really reckoning with it, which I did for many years, I just accepted it. I guess I trusted my culture, and I was a very suggestible, nice kid that my parents said I was very easy. And, I had a prayer at night and I would just do the traditional beg for things like, I hope my family's safe and thanks for this and that. And I believe that, you died on the cross and now I can go be a shithead all week. And just as long as I believe in you, I can like move on and not think about the cosmos and the nature of anything. And I'm big on self-empowerment while respecting the Mormon and the person that goes to the ashram and all of the different ways and mediums in which everyone's partaking in the human experience. I've had to learn, like, I work with these people. The conservative person that would just, if they heard this conversation, be like, these people are practicing witchcraft and and so I realize it can be divisive, and I want to meet people where they're at and be respectful and kind and understanding that like we're all where we're at. I'm on team human. I want everybody to feel good and feel better. But when you do connect with the breath and you slow down and you start to let go, which even in my little groups, that's all we do is slow down, let go. and there's no conditioning, no subconscious programming happening other than like be grateful for the fact that you're alive and awake and aware and there's something happening from nothing. What a cool thing. And then out of that comes each person's own connection to source, which is that state, which I think you're going to get into. We haven't even talked about gamma and breath work or any of the traditional stuff that you normally talk to, which I love. I think this has been more
Yeah,
of a fun
this is fun.
conversation than I even could have expected. But yeah, I like people for me to empower people is to point out and push on the stuff that's ugly, the shadow. And the shadow right now is here in our face, right? And it's our time. And every time that we've been here through all of history, there was never like a utopian time. There's always been tyrants and weirdos and warriors and people that want to create more chaos and pain. But it's like, how do we show up inside of this container with a little bit of surrender, a little bit of faith, a little bit of leaning into it, but what are we going to do about it? And I like to point out that MK Ultra and all that stuff happened because it's still here. It doesn't just dissolve, go away. And not to say that we're worried about it, but if we don't understand that these things that we're receiving information from our smartphones and all of these social media apps are not algorithmically driving us into division and into suppression, and it's making the religious retreat, and it's making everybody super divided and left and right, and what's Donald Trump doing today, and everybody has this idea that some politician's going to save us. They're not. There is no politician that's going to come and save you from all of the chaos that's happening. And it does come back to the stuff that you're talking to. So I think this is an important part of the conversation, talking about the weird shadowy
Absolutely.
stuff.
It's the chaos that I think is makes people make weird decisions. And at a time where there's a lot of decisions being made, um, I go back to the fact that I think for me, my certain place in this world, where we all play a part in being alive and aware, and it's like I think my job is to help bond the unseen with the seen so that we create more of a relationship in choices to this other realm. And it's really been separate. Science and religion are still separate in so many ways. And there's this closed-mindedness that we need to get over, because the electromagnetic field is a measurable thing. Science is ready to step into the woo-woo, and the woo-woo could really use the reinforcement right now. Like a good example of the chaos that I think is creating a lot of issues with the generation just younger than us is pornography and sexuality, and how it's become this currency amongst people. And even people on Instagram are like, I'm not going to sleep with you unless, you pay for all of my stuff and yada, yada, yada. And it's like, wow, the outline of like what romance has become is such a financial thing. And I think the bioelectric model would get us over this confusion about sex for the next generation so quickly. So quickly. And realizing that we are holding a toroidal field. And this toroidal field, when we merge it with someone else, becomes imprinted with that energy. So when you're sleeping with someone, you are taking on their energetic pattern for a period of time. How do you feel about that imprint? How do you feel the next morning when you wake up? And instead of talking about things so like logically, like, oh, I'm a female, and my grandma made sure that I could be, whatever I wanted to be in this lifetime. It's like, that's great. Sexual empowerment is a good thing for us to have in our culture, but without the context of how our bioelectric field is working, the kind of the sacredness is lost. So people that are like, oh, women can wear whatever they want, I have a hard time with that. I live in an area where every woman at the gym is in the tiniest shorts and the tiniest shirt, and I'm just walking around in a pair of sweats and a t-shirt with no makeup, and I'm just like, I'm not against women. And like, it's become very polarizing for me to even say anything online. God forbid
Yeah.
I talk about how to like recover from Botox injury. I mean, holy shit. Like, what I've gotten back is it's very close-minded. And it's like, okay, women, what's up? How can we talk about this overtly sexual culture that we're normalizing and bring it back to sacredness? Like, where's the reference? How do you actually feel when you put your head on the pillow at night? And like, what are we teaching to a 15-year-old? That the only thing that's worth value to them is how they're looking, and like they should be getting Botox as soon as possible because what they are is not enough. That's the message that we're communicating. And I feel like my little job in this whole grand scheme of chaos is to help create the link electrically between the actual body and this unseen mechanism. And the unseen is our electromagnetic field. And when we can wrap our mind around the fact that we are 20 feet wide, not 2 feet wide, well, with whatever's inside of your 20 feet, you are going to be kind of ingesting like it's in your stomach in a way. So when people that are highly anxious, that are walking around, they're like, oh, I don't feel good. And they're always saying it's about the food that they ate. You're missing out on a huge electrical circuit of what's potentially affecting you. How do we dialogue with the nuance of energy conversation? It's always been put in this like intuition bucket. That's this big sloppy bucket that tunes us out of our real gifts. And there's this sense of like laughing in the face of danger. Like I think having merriment with the confusion is really important. I think it's, if I were to walk into hell, that would be my immediate thing, is laughing as much as possible and then creating sacredness at home. Like my cottage is a very sacred place for me. I very seldom invite people over. I would rather interact with people in a public setting because where I sleep and how I move is kind of for me. This is my space. I don't even want it to be looked at psychically by others. So there's this sense of protection of my own sacred, reverent little space that I made for myself that I keep nice and clean. So it's like when I interact with the world, there's this, you get charged up and ready for that, but you have a safe place to retreat within that charges you up with all aspects of yourself. I think a lot of the renters out there that are moving around a lot, they feel disconnected to the world. And it's like, yeah, because you don't have anything that gives you that sense of comfort. Your sense of home is this like modern and sterile place that doesn't make you feel attached and connected. Which is why like growing mighty trees and keeping bees, I think is one of the biggest tricks to feeling connected to the community around you, because you're making such an investment with something that's going to far outlive you. Hopefully like the farm that I'm building, the bees are like these tiny little creatures that are literally the messengers of love. I think having good relationships with nature like that helps us extend our field. It helps us extend our awareness. Like animals teach us to be telepathic. So having those types of relationships, I think, are essential to us opening up, but we all play a part here. And like your part, as I'm going to use the word shaman, I don't know if that's the word you would choose for yourself, but you are guiding the divine masculine in your own community to come back into that center piece, that's into their center. And it's like, I think I'm doing the same in my own community. And it's going to take a lot of us to just continue to beat that drum over time for us to elevate the consciousness of humanity. And there's going to be a lot of things that happen, and our philosophies, our frameworks that we share, I think is going to help assist how these things are used. It's like, I think right now, people like you and I need to stay present, aware, and brave to just kind of tackle all of the newness. I mean, there's about to be surrogate babies from robots like next year in China. We're going to be dealing with a lot of philosophical, like, what is life? Are they going to be lesser life forms because they were born from a robot? Are they going to have their own, like it's kind of untold what we're going to be challenged to wrap our minds around. So staying like present, aware, giggly, realizing that we will outlive this too. This is just a juncture in time that we get to have the privilege of being alive. I hope that all made sense.
Absolutely. I love it. Other than calling myself a shaman, but everything else was beautiful. And I think the anchor piece, especially now everybody's promoting van life. And I think that the Klaus Schwabs and all these technocracy folks want to uproot everybody and make them feel less grounded, less rooted. And I think now more than ever, we need more anchor. And from my experience, my dog was my best teacher, to be honest. One of my greatest teachers was this dog named Bella, who slowed me down because I wanted to be home more, which allowed me to be still and allowed me to read and allowed me to create a sanctuary around me where I had the presence, like you're saying, to appreciate how lucky we are to just be a human being and not just be doing, chasing, seeking, and all the illusions of status and chasing dollars or whatever it is that we're taught to chase, because it's all indoctrinated, and the OnlyFans and the dating apps and all the bullshit that's come in to hijack all of the primitive components of the sexuality of our minds. It's sad to watch now, because girls and guys, they're sort of betraying their deeper selves, you know? And so I don't think you can get off of the momentum train if you don't have some form of anchor. And it really does start with what you speak to well, is the breath. That component of just knowing that you're breathing, and while you're breathing, like, how am I breathing? And maybe you could spend a little time in nature and get back to the fundamentals. It's like some of the stuff is so simple, it's free. Most of the best medicine is just Dr. Sun, Dr. Moon, Dr. Stillness, all these things, like, it's
That's a
not
good way
the
to refer.
outside. Yeah, I think it was Paul Chek that says that, because I've been told, well, if you're off work, because I take preventative sick days. I take my sick days are because I don't get sick. Thank God. I'm very blessed. But it's to break the cycle and to go off into nature, or to go to Maui or wherever I want to go, to really just reset and to be. To me, that is incredible, because I'm going to see my doctors. And if you want a doctor's note, I will write Dr. Sun what it taught me, Dr. Psilocybin what it taught me, and it's like someone could laugh at that, but it's so true. And then why am I vibrating at a healthy frequency? Because I'm very lucky to have had access to all of this. I wasn't the unfortunate one. And people say you shouldn't say luck, you created that. But at some level, I like feeling lucky, because I've thought it through and I've looked at it, and I was born out of a healthy birth canal with a healthy body and a loving family. And there's all these things that just went right that I didn't do. And I see stuff all the time where it's like not so right. You go into environments where you're like, that poor kid, is dealing with the most severe abuse or whatever it is. And not that they're victims and that they're not going to be the strongest soul, because there's so many ways to learn. But me not understanding why suffering exists is a good humbling starting point to go, I'm lucky, so I have more obligation to be more of service to some degree in some fashion, without even adding all of the things that I could add to it with belief, because belief is so powerful. And I don't think people even take time to look at their BS, their belief systems. And if you don't, then you're just walking around with all this BS. And I think that's why the scientists and the people don't want to use these tools, because they show you immediately that weird, the first half hour of any trip usually for me is like, oh, I've been just enamored with funk and what should I be doing and all this stuff. And you have to just laugh at it, like you said, and throw it away, and then get back to seeing that other plane of existence where you're like, okay, I want to remember, letting go. And anyway, there's so many things that you've said, but I love the anchor piece. I think anchor and having a stability somewhere, even if it's a little tidy room, if you have roommates or something, create
Yes.
a little an altar and create a sacred space in that little room. It doesn't mean you have to have land and all this cool stuff that we're so lucky to have, but yeah, the anchor is so important, because you can't feel like you can go anywhere without a nice route. Like I think of myself when I'm traveling far, far out, I picture a kite string. And I've even seen it metaphysically, metaphorically, as like permission slips. Like you have permission to go a little further because you're anchored, you're rooted. And so if I come back in and I wiggle my fingers and I connect with the physical body and I go, okay, I'm still here, whatever, I can go further. And I think this idea of van life and travel the world and all this stuff, a lot of times it's escaping. And that sometimes these people are not traveling, they're escaping, and they're just trying to get more likes on Instagram. And at the end of the day, it's empty and it's lonely. And 90% of those vans are for sale right now because people realize they're disconnected. They don't have community. There's nothing growing in their environment. Like you said, I have all these cactus that I've been planting for years, and now they're taller than me. And I'm like, look at these guys. They're like my
Look at my
grandpas now.
babies.
Yeah.
I love what you're highlighting here. It's something definitely I haven't talked about before on any of the other podcasts. And when I think of like some of the women that I coach and their state of stress, it all comes from future. It all comes from worrying about safety and security within the future. And there's this like oh, what is it called? It's a famous. It's like it's a famous book. It'll hit me here in a minute. And they talk about how your relationship to death is like literally first relationship that you need to build to come into the state of the magical. And I just got done rewatching the Star Wars series, and I loved how often they would treat death with this like sense of cocky boisterousness. Like, they'll just jump out the window and like have full trust because they're moving in one with this force that's outside of them. So they're always in dialogue with this like nuanced field that's telling them go for it or hang back. And there's this sense of wisdom that's disseminated through the six episodes of how different masters communicate with the force and use it. And when we think of someone like, Wayne Dyer, who it's like, what is that guy talking about and studying when he feels a certain way and he's breathing and he's just walking on the beach? And I thought for a while that I also wanted to travel, that I also wanted to like show up on Instagram and be like, oh, I'm here and I'm here. So 4 months ago, I got a couple back-to-back opportunities, one of them international, and I was gone for 2 weeks. And I remember when I came back home, I was so exhausted. I had not slept well. I was separated from all of my tools here. And when I walked through the door, I started to hysterically cry. And it was because I missed myself. Like, who I am is so different than what the world has to offer. Like, I walked through and my Basset statue is right by the door and my instruments are there. And it was like, whoa, my space was so eccentric compared to everything else out there that it felt like my own little temple. And it's this temple. It doesn't have to be a whole space. A temple, an altar space is fire, earth, air, water. In the information age, we have a chance to call all of the religions around the world and say, hey, how do you guys open your church? How do you guys open your temple? It's all of the same everywhere in the world, offering to fire, earth, air, and water. And when we do that, when we really like take a minute and to say thank you to the water that is within us, thank you to the water that is around us, thank you to the fire within us, and feel that within our breath, thank you to the earth within us, within the bone, the calcium phosphate that makes up our crystalline structure. When we take these moments, we become altered. That's like an altar space is just a period of time where you're going to alter your consciousness. And the Chinese ritual is to light an incense, and an incense takes about 15 minutes to burn. So people that are in grief, I often say, set up an altar, light a white candle, and have your fire, earth, air, water. It could be just a derivative of two. If you have a plant and water that can serve two purposes, a salt lamp can serve two purposes, it can be small. But it's in these junctures that we have a chance to come back to silence and stillness in an equation way, in a sequenced way, where we're starting to bond the mind with the elements of what is real: fire, earth, air, water. Everything else oscillates, and do we really die? Does the voltage within us actually die, or does it kind of get distended in between atoms? I had an experience with a physicist about 5 to 6 years ago now. He was a physical medium that was a physicist, and he would charge a basement with extra electrons and then prove that the dead were not dead. They're still alive. But there was a sequence in opening the space in which these forces could interact with us in a way with no medicine. And it was all scientifically based. It was such an incredible experience to show that the energy that is within us, it's housed, it's encased in this biological body, and it's an instrument for this voltage to come through us. And it's measurable right here at the God zone, at the brainstem. And when it's like, okay, when we get into the electrical experience, the question then becomes like, well, how do we extend this voltage that's powering through us? How do we hold it open? How can we, in a sense, resonate with so much frequency that we are discharging abundance into our atmosphere, where we're kind of changing things around us? Is it magic, or is it just physics working through the body? And magic is a word that's so dismissed in science because we've used it to clump together all of these processes as intuition, prophetic visions, telepathy, the ability to have foresight, gut intuition. I think you're going to see a lot of this coming up in the next decade. Veda Austin has this like very interesting theory she's working about on water, and how water is maybe the mechanism in which we are using the intuitive structure. It's from the water that's housed within us. Um, that we can side note on that forever, but
Yeah, no, I love all of this. And Veda is someone I would love to get on the podcast. I've been following her work as well. And I think it's such an exciting time to be alive. And it's nice to look back through language. There's this guy, Peter, I met at this quantum biology event, and he's really deep into physics, but also like this creative artist that can play the ukulele. And like, he's just, you can tell he's a full on, just fully alive, fully vibrating, neat guy. And I couldn't get away from him. I just like wanted to follow him around like a puppy dog at the event, because he was such a high vibrational being, a good guy, and a neat guy that has so much knowledge. And he actually just wrote this book. But anyway, people like him. It's not hard to be around certain people and to witness that, yeah, they're contagious. And I tell new guys this now, because I didn't know this when I got hired, but I'm like, we are nervous system managers to some degree. And if you don't have the ability to be calm in chaos, you become a little bit of part of the scene, and it's contagious. And if you start flipping out and your awareness shrinks and your tunnel vision, and I remember my first fire, I went in and I don't remember what the building looked like because I was so excited and I didn't have breath control and I wasn't present. And thank God it worked out, because you fall back on your training, you pull the hand line, you do the thing, and you come out and it's all over and like, holy shit, what just happened? And I think that's what happens with all top performers, like you said. And at the end of the day, in life as a metaphor, it's like, how present, how aware can we be? And it's all this like vibration frequency stuff that you're getting to with water and electromagnetism, and people don't want to pin it down because we don't have the language and the science for it, but it's because we removed it. Peter was reminding me that we went to Old English, and you start to look at words that were removed or changed to make us almost disempowered. And that goes back to the authoritarian models of like control. And so I think the more we can question authority and get back into the stillness, slowing down, like you're saying, we keep hammering on this, you start to have access to more information that's been there forever. You always have access to it. But what's happening is we're in this information society, this weird world that they've created, where it's harder and harder to disconnect and unplug and to reset. And I think it's more important now than ever to unplug and to slow down and to get away from all this stuff for periods at a time, even if it's 3 days. I have a vision someday to create all these cool like geodesic domes and have people just do these basic circadian resets. It doesn't even take plant medicine. Just 3 or 4 days, check your phone in. You don't get your phone. You might cook together, because cooking together brings joy, and like it's so good to have community. But then you're just out in nature, and you're just away from the distraction. It's so simple. But yeah. Anyway, I want to go into. You probably have to get going, or no? Are you good for a minute?
No, I'm good for a little bit. I'm so sorry. I'm sure we didn't like really even hit some of the major questions you have.
No, this has been phenomenal.
I really appreciate like what you're highlighting here, and I think your idea is awesome, and like not to be overlooked, because a lot of people are seeking the routines that can bring them back to balance, and what you're offering there is so great. I had another thought come through, but it moved past me, but we'll see if it comes back.
Well, I love that. Yeah, I've had that too. I have like scribbles everywhere, and I normally don't have that, but I'm like, there's notes all over my desk because you're saying so many cool things. I'll have to go re-listen to this, which I don't normally do either. But the way you speak to fascia, I've never heard anyone speak to better. I took an Eldoa class a long time ago, and it was really good, and it started to help me learn about this thing called fascia. And you speak to it so well. And I'd love for you, if you don't mind, if you have the time to just help people to hear, what is fascia and why is it so important to pay attention to?
Well, to speak about how language has been kind of disempowered, we have that in fascia. So the IFAA is the governing body of medical literature. So if somebody was in like a medical lawsuit, they would go to the definitions of the IFAA. And the word fascia itself really could be kind of broken up. Fascia in Latin means hatchet. Means like a cross section. So when you open up a body, right, we've been taught as fascia as something like a piece of plastic wrap, which I didn't like, because after you look at a handful of cadavers, you're like, man, the doctors aren't talking about the structure that's within it. So I used to describe it kind of like this. Like there's a geometric shape within a thin membrane of collagen. And I recently replaced it with a sponge in the last 6 months. I have here. And a sponge is more of a good example because a loofah, for instance, grows as a connective tissue. And then how do I do? It's right here. I'm sorry. So this loofah is grown together as one unit, and then there's areas that have open space and then areas that are denser. This really could replicate the fascia of our lower body in so many ways. And my program really focuses on the structure and the tension of the major fascia bands. So if we were to take a skeleton and hold it upright, right? Every skeleton that you see is held basically with a post up its butt, or it's suspended from the ceiling. And it's because there's no muscles and there's no fascia. If we were to add the muscles into that skeleton, the muscles wouldn't even connect to the bone. So muscles connect through the bone via fascia everywhere in the body. Everything is suspended in this. So if we made a miniature model of a body and we took a whole bunch of these sponges and put it together, then we could start to kind of place things in, right? But that's a surgical thought. Like what I just described seems very linear, right? But it's still, we're looking at the body like a surgeon. And a surgeon has been taking bodies apart and looking at pieces of it. If we think like a gardener, we think very differently about this structure. This is a grown, sophisticated unit. This is all made together in one concert, like my tree out there. So the language that is used in medicine would take a tree that's behind me, like this eucalyptus tree, and they would cut it down, dry it out, pulverize it, put it in a slide, look at the pathology of the cells within it, and then they would study, the soil that's around it, right? A gardener, if they were to study this eucalyptus, would go to a eucalyptus jungle and study the most thriving specimens. They would take tiny little samples and look at it, and they would see it as a homogeneous structure. They would see the health of the tree not only as that singular tree, but what is the community doing? What is the mycelium beneath the ground doing? What is the sun above them doing? Then they would determine a sequence for the healthiest eucalyptuses, and then they would apply that to the nursery that they're growing or the farm that they're growing. And if we took this concept to medicine and said, okay, what does healthy joint function look like? We would start to treat the body very differently. So fascia is what's going to determine our joint health over time. So if a runner has run the same amount of miles, right, on both knees, but one knee is aging faster than the other, why is that? Well, what I have found is that it is asymmetrical fascia tension that is playing on the major fascia bands. So I'm not talking about like little every ache and pain around our ankles. I'm talking about major scar tissue or immobilization that's happened within this sponge structure that is throwing off the tensions through the joints. So after studying like 28 different fascia release mechanisms, I put together this like baker recipe of 8 fundamental rules that if we focus on these 8 rules, we can recreate the fluidity. So like most of the fascia release mechanism books that I've read in things that I've gone to are very hyper fixated on where the sponge of the fascia has been stuck together and how to rip it apart. But there's this other thing that happens with athletes where like you're dealing with surgeries, you're dealing with like latent scar tissue that we've built muscle around, so it's not on the superficial layer anymore. It's not fresh anymore. It's, it's buried underneath muscle. We've built healthier muscle on top of it. How do we get rid of that? Then where it's loose because we've overtrained or overstretched or ripped something, how do we create that sense of balance again? So my program was so driven for, okay, I'm an athlete, I'm on tour, don't have access to a therapist. What can I do most efficiently that I can squeeze into already a busy training day to create balance here? And after I built my little sequence and experimented for a while, my plantar fasciitis that I had went away in a week, but my hip click that I've had since I could walk, that went away in 2 weeks. And I was dumbfounded. I was like, man, I have seen so many specialists for my hips. I've seen so many PTs for my hip click. No one could give me a straight answer. It was all surgery. Yet here in 2 weeks with this little routine I built, all of a sudden my hip click's gone. So I started to roll it out confidently with my parents, who both suffered from knee pain. My dad, who has a surgery on his one knee, both of their knee pain went away in a couple weeks. And so I started to experiment with clients. And that's when I noticed that my breath sequence paired with fascia flow altered the brain. After, teaching meditation classes regularly, what to expect at the end of your group. 50% of them are kind of sleepy, 50% are kind of anxious, a little itchy, a little twitchy, ready to go. When I added the fascia flow before we did breath work, it started to be 100% of my classes were just knocked out. And I'm like, whoa, this is unusual. I must have been really on tonight. Yeah, I took credit for it myself. I must have really showed up as a good teacher. Then after 6 months of, I realized it was just the sequence. The sequence had this magical way of releasing the stress, the tension that had built up throughout the day, and it made the breath work amplified. But also the breath work, because it's such a slow breath weight pattern, also led to really efficient releases within the fascia. So this vocabulary that we established through the body to kind of determine the spots of priority, which is what you don't get with a massage therapist. They're going to tell you where the spots are, versus this is, okay, body, during the warm up, where are these spots of tension? What's the highest priority tension? Where is the exact spot? And we follow the 8 rules to release this tension. And it's you can see, I'll get an email in the first week where it's hey, I noticed my tension headaches are gone. And then I'll get a second email and it's hey, my knees feel kind of weird. And I'm just yep, maybe take a day off, or, we talk about asana, we kind of troubleshoot with whatever they're going through. And then I'll get another one 4 weeks in and they're yo, my knee pain is gone. I've been living this for 20 years. I've been in a knee brace. How is it in 4 weeks it's gone? It's welcome to the team, man. Make sure you try the breath program, because it works better when you do it that way. And you can just get to a point where a lot of people, for me, when they get out of pain, they kind of stop training. And then their pain will come back and I'll get an email and they'll be hey, I haven't practiced while my knee pain's back. And I can tell, but it took 4 weeks of not training. And I was dude, if you can just squeeze it in twice a week, you can live without the pain. But, and this is where I feel most excited, if they keep training after the pain is gone, all of these other things happen, because the triple helix collagen fiber makeup of the fascia holds our nerves. So when somebody has a sore muscle, they're oh, my muscles are swollen. It's bro, that's just your fascia feeling the tightness. There's 6 times as many nerves within the fascia. When we start when we get past, okay, it's fluid and now it's balanced, so the joints are working properly. So now you're not dealing with chronic inflammation. Your feet feel more open, so your balance is better. Then if they keep training, the softness that becomes inherent in their tissues starts to expand their field. Their awareness increases. The dreams start to come back online. And that's when I get the emails that I get most excited about. It's hey, this thing that used to happen as a kid is starting to happen. Is this normal? And I'm yeah. Make sure you do the mighty breath. It's going to get fun. Because we're adults now. It's complex to be a choice maker. How do we make choices? Choices shouldn't be just intellectual. It should also dial in. Does it feel good? Does it feel simple? Does this bring me a sense of divinity or beauty in my life? And choice, to me, is a physiological conversation. If somebody's yeah, talk to me.
I just meant for you also start from the feet up, which is a beautiful thing too, because I was thinking of, I always like to return to what did people do thousands of years ago to get their fascia right? Well, they walked around barefoot on uneven surfaces, which was a fascial, for me, after listening to your stuff, I started really getting into it with the tennis ball and everything, right? But then I found this really cool rock at the fire station that's out on the side of the station where no one can see me. I hide over there and I take my shirt off and get some sun, so that's not hey, the guy has his shirt off, because people are still stupid about that. But I love to be in the sun with my shirt off, and I like to get my feet on this weird rock, and I can do balancing exercises and step around on something as simple as that. And I feel I'm getting this incredible natural fascial release. And so I'm wondering, when you start from the feet up, tell me a little bit about feet up too. I didn't mean to cut you off there, but.
That's okay. It's funny because a lot of people that are into fascia are into like face fitness, or like they have a shoulder pain that they're very excited about. And in the beginning of starting my program, it was like I had to be a bully a little bit. Like, I don't care if about your shoulder pain. You know, your shoulder pain's probably coming from something in your glute or your hamstring. Um, so I had to kind of like build confidence to be so strong about it. But when we build tensegrity structures, it becomes so obvious because you can't hoist anything in the air until the lower part, until your foundation is made. So it was in the building of the models that I was able to get really firm with people of like, if you have scar tissue on this one side of your leg that has built up, it is going to naturally pull your hip down, right? But the cerebral spinal fluid that's floating in our brain needs to stay balanced. Otherwise, we'd have brain damage. If you walked around like this for several hours, you'll notice that like you don't feel right. You don't feel good. So if your hip is being pulled down, your shoulder will compensate by tightening up, right? So there's this really big technique right now called Bowen therapy, and he has great results with locked shoulder. And he treats the locked shoulder with a massage gun based on an angle for like an extended period of time. So people in 2 sessions for 30 minutes, and he's like, oh, we focus on the hyaluronic acid movement, which is what I say. And because he's taking a massage gun and pummeling the fluid around it. And it's like, okay, great. Not to like rip on Bowen, but like if that shoulder is locked up because the hip is stuck into position, that shoulder is just a consequence. It's not the originating point. So I don't look at local pain when we're talking about the fascia. I look at global pain. So even if somebody comes to me for, I have an issue with TMJ, it's like, okay, if we look at your standing posture, and I don't even tell people to look at their standing posture. I'm just like, let's start to treat the body from the ground up, and whatever's happening in the upper body will sort itself out. And once the lower body gets to 80% reduced in tension, I do have a whole upper body sequence. But what I find most of the time is by the time we're through the hips and there's no more electrical radiating or dull spots within the lower body, the upper body is normally fine. Unless there's been like, you tore your shoulder and we have to like work the chest a little bit. The upper body is simply, it's simply a mirror to the awkward tension or the asymmetrical tension of the lower body. And really when we look at the foot is so complex. 26 bones in the feet, 4 bones in the whole leg. So when the pinky toe, and this is what I see as like the Achilles heel for many people, particularly firefighters with you guys in those boots, the pinky toe gets smashed on the inside, and just that simple like push against the rest of your foot, that toe starts to go offline because you're in those boots for 7-10 hours or whatever. And you start to just ever so slightly rotate your weight on the outside of the foot instead of down the middle. And then that little chronic tension starts to build up tension down the lateral band, because that's not how we're built. We're built for walking toe to heel through the center line of the foot. So it's like when we start to, walk in these tight shoes, we walk on the outside, we're changing the tension, we're warping the tension ever so slightly on the outside of the body, which stresses the knees out. And then it's just a game of Jenga. It's like, how fast are you training? How hard are you training? And then something's going to give, something's going to slightly tear. And then they find me. And then we just go through the same kind of, ground up protocol. We're creating symmetry and fluidity. And then, whenever they get out of pain, my job is to keep them training, because there's this elevation of consciousness on the other side of pain that we can't get to,
Yeah. I think you cut off there. I don't mean to. I'm just going to wait 1 second to see where.
No,
were
I'm
you in
here.
a flow there?
No,
okay,
I just got done.
Okay, cool. I saw you freeze there, and I'm like, she might be flowing. I'm going to give it a moment. Yeah, there's a component to the fascia that I've heard you bring up too that goes back to Pollack's work, that fourth phase water component, and how I'm curious, how much does the light, the natural sunlight and the water, getting that right, the hydration, and then the magnetism, getting away from non-native EMF, how much does that play into our fascia as well?
Oh, it's everything. Me and Gerald got to hang out like 5 months ago, and I got to tell you, that guy blows my brain. He just like any good scientist makes you wonder harder, makes you ask deeper questions, and he certainly did
Mm-hmm.
that. I love the guy. I have both of his books. I highly recommend them to anybody that wants to learn more about water, and the illustrations are phenomenal. It's like does not read like a normal textbook. Um, so fourth phase water is, I would always say that breath rate is responsible for our circulation, but Gerald's work opened me up to the fact that sunshine is enormous for the movement of circulation. So his work kind of like threw me for a loop a bit, because like I gave the breath 1,000% credence to pumping the fluids, and his work has really showed me like, oh shit, like light moving through the fascia has this other ability. And the experiment that really showed that to me was they took a chicken embryo and removed the heart of the chicken. So breath rate controls
Wow.
heart rate. So with no heart rate, where is the rhythm coming from? And they found that light was enough to create the circulation of fluids for like 5 minutes after the heart was removed. Wild.
Mm.
So light and exposing your tissues to sunshine, I would say I like kind of want to rank these in order of importance. Like if somebody's wants to take care of their fascia, but maybe they're not in pain enough to buy my program, or they don't have, scar tissue to deal with, and they're like, well, I'm not going to do that, but I want to do something functional. Best
Mm-hmm.
thing that we can do is to increase our quality of water. Um, Best quality of water, spring water that is only touched glass or steel, ideally just glass, that has been exposed to either the Earth's magnetic field, like if it's spring water and it's not like ozonated after, like it should have the structure, this hexagonal structure that allows our body to easily absorb it. If it's been sitting for a really long time, it turns into what Gerald Pollack calls bulk water, where it loses that structure and you can drink a ton of water. You kind of still feel dehydrated. That's usually not a mineral issue. It's the structure of the water. And you can change the structure of your water by spinning it in a clockwise motion for 30 seconds until it swirls. You can sit it out in the sunshine for a few hours. You can actually make holy water by exposing water to light in the moonshine for 28 days. That stuff tastes like rainbows. If you haven't tried
Mm.
that, wow. I was on a real routine there for a little while with holy water. Best water I've ever drank. For real. So it would be increasing the quality of water, but also increasing your sweat. So some people like can't sweat from their feet, can't sweat from their hands. That's a really big deal. That's your body showing you that you have stagnant fluid. That can be just as detrimental to the body as not drinking good water. So you can be drinking all of the water in the world. Like hairdressers to me are great examples, because they're so beautiful. Their hair is always done, so they don't want to get sweaty. And then, so they have these swollen hands and they're like, Brooke, my fascia hurts in my hands. And I'll squeeze it and then I'll rub their arm. Old Chinese medicine trick. If you just create a lot of friction on like one of your forearms for about a minute, I should really have it against a table. You want to do good pressure. If your hand starts to sweat, it shows you that there's stagnant water trapped in your system. So
Mm.
fascia is just like a sponge. It's our ability to squeeze into it and expand out of it, which is all water based. Fascia moves in water. So the higher quality water and the more sweating, game changer. If people are sweating and like in a sauna and they wake up the next day very, very sore, that is a conversation for blood pH that's showing us that like your body is not resilient to opening and closing. And we really need to work the fascia consciously. People that drink too much alcohol, people that drink too much soda, they often talk about like a headache or a migraine or a soreness that happens after like just going to do a 20 to 45-minute sauna session. Those people, I would say, get a pH strips and measure the first pee of your morning. Go pee for a few seconds and then measure the pH strip of your urine. This is going to give you a really good barometer of your blood pH. The kidneys are filtering our blood. So it's kind of the closest way that we can tailor ourselves to where we're chronically holding. It's an amazing thing to do with your family members that are addicted to soda, because I can
Mm.
say soda is bad for you. It stresses out your fascia. It makes everything kind of like calcified. It's very impure, right? But if I show them, oh, you have incredibly acidic urine, this is showing us that your blood is acidic. If your blood is acidic for an extended period of time, we're going to deal with tons of issues in the body. I want you to work up to staying neutral for days and days on end. And you'll see people be like, oh, I had to give up coffee. Oh, I'm only down to 1 soda a week now. And it's because they have their own barometing system of what is the fluid that's actually running through these sponges? What's the quality of those fluids? So that would be my 3 greatest bits of advice is like increase the quality of your water. No water out of plastic. Plastic is it's kind of a big deal in the body. I'm diving into it. There's been a couple brand new inventions that just got released this week. I'm looking forward into exploring that. But the blood pH, the quality of water that you're putting in, and the amount of times that you're sweating it out, all incredibly important. After that, it's a matter of getting these tissues operating correctly, these major fascia bands operating correctly, so that your joints will live good, long, healthy. When we do injure ourselves, having a protocol to recover. I think that's the coolest thing is like when my athletes injure themselves, I'm just like, so what did you do before I give them what my protocol is? And it's like just A+, like sovereignty. Before they talk to their therapist, before they talk to anybody, they already know, okay, I hadn't been training. I was kind of stressed. I was a little dehydrated. This kind of tweaked. So this morning I woke up, I did sauna. I took, I drank a lot of good water. I increased my minerals and I did the fascia flow. And they're like, I'm already feeling better. I think by tomorrow I'll be good. And it's like, yes, like that's how we get through recovery is like we listen to the body, we hear what it says, then we go through the protocol to restore it as fast as possible. And that's like such a big win as a coach. Like when they spit out the perfect restoration routine, you're just like, my job here is done. You've done great.
Yeah. I love the empowerment piece that you always talk about too, that you can do this alone. You don't need the therapist. It's something that I'm big on. It's like you don't always have to outsource your health and wellness and spirituality, all these things to something outside of you. And you're always pushing back to what can I do as an individual to take full responsibility. And also the environment piece, like how much the fascia, looking at it from that different view of being interconnected with all of the other components. And I feel like even with the so-called mental health movement, the DSM model and all this stuff, everybody is looking at the individual as the person that has the problem. And we need to diagnose you with this little category and prescribe a medicine for the symptom. And it's like, well, hold on a minute. You should first do like Krishnamurti said and realize you're in an insane environment. The world is insane. And now you're trying to measure up to fit into that. That's an insane model. And so like the Buddhists and a lot of different traditions would say, no, it's the environment is playing such a role. Maybe you could either change that, but it's not that you're this problem that needs to be better and you need a self-help movement and doctors and medicine. And so I think the environment interconnection piece is something we keep getting back to. And the fascia is something that the way you describe it has brought so much joy to me. The first time I heard you speaking on the way forward about it, I was like, geez, I can't believe it. It was one of those like aha moments because the breath and light and all these things are so important. I like to do triage because that's what we do is like look for the best possible thing to do to have the most possible leverage and impact when there's chaos. And so I like to think in forms of triaging, and it's like, get the breath right first. And so I'm always big on breath, light, movement, sleep, all these fundamentals. But then I'm like, how did I not really think about this fascia piece when it's everything that I've been reading about from all these different vantage points, not realizing that it's sort of everything. It's like this intelligent system that makes you, you know?
Honestly, the definition for fascia, I am like arguing about in my head because like even when we look at the bone, if we were to cut a piece of bone in half, the inside is like this hexagonal structure called trabecular bone. And when we look at what a bone is, it's composed, like it's made of like kind of 2 cells, but it's kind of alive and kind of dead. Like 20% of it really gets blood flow and 80% of it has become this like concrete. And that concrete is made of collagen, which is fascia. And then it's mixed with calcium phosphorus, which is this, it's like an apatite. It's called an apatite crystal. So it's a crystalline structure that's been blended with fascia. And it's like the medical model is so robotic, so linear, so mechanistic that like we've looked at the body as these pieces, these compartments that you fit together. And it's like, oh, you have a liver problem, so we're going to, or gallbladder problem, we're just going to take that out. Instead of looking holistically like gardeners about what grows a healthy human, what grows great bone structure. Well, really good tongue positioning, really good swallowing, really good breathing habits. What grows good joints that last a long time, really good symmetrical fascia fluidity, a feeling of honey-like fluid deeply compressed and palpated within the tissues. So I still feel like we're stuck with even like what is fascia, thinking of it as this like separate structure. It's like, really, I would love for the word fascia, to me, is it's a silly word when you look at the Latin root and like where it comes from. And it is the cytoplasm, it's the matrix that's holding all of us together, and it even includes the bone, and it's piezoelectric, metaphasic, viscoelastic, and polymorphic. It's changing, but the bones are also this piece of crystal. And it's like, I don't think that we're going to make the conscious jump until we're ready to talk about voltage through the body. Voltage through the body is going to open us up to like, yes, the fascia is important. The fluidity with the fascia is important. But when that happens, we become more aware, more attuned to how the electricity moves through us and out of our tissues in every way. Our feet are taking in information, our skin is taking in information, and that light is being converted into vitamins. Like, it's the bad cholesterol in our blood. When the light hits it, turns into vitamin D. So this whole instrument within is operating on a voltage system. Voltage is what is informing the cells. And yes, like, I love a good chiropractor that does upper cervical adjustments, but if they're not looking at your feet, they're not really looking at how your posture moves. They're looking at you in a static horizontal position and trying to get you lined up. They're not looking at scar tissue that's built up, that you built up muscle. So like there's limitations until we really come back into like, okay, I am a piece of electricity that's being housed in a body. That electricity is being moved through my body at 268 miles an hour through the fascia tissue, which is either dehydrated and stuck and slimy and hard, or it's fluid and open and like highly conductive. And then the breath rate is going to take that information and either make it pulsate and surge, like in a good, like you think of a strong pulse electromagnetic frequency, boom, boom, boom. I think of a good drummer of a band that like sits down, behind a show, and the crowd starts to roar, and they're just holding that voltage, that like kinetic potential. That's like what I think about when we're in this like very stable place and like feeling the voltage within us. But that's my dream. I want to get people there where they're feeling the voltage within them move through the fascia, and then they're controlling that voltage with breath rate. That's where infinite creative solutions come from. People like you and I, we're not going to fix the world. The next gen will. We need to hold back the chaos for the little inventors and geniuses that are already being born, that are already coming up. They're going to have the solutions we need. We're going to stand in awe and reverence to the solutions that they bring. And we're going to just hold back the insanity with maniacal laughter, I think.
I love it. You are one interesting human being. Is there anything you'd like to say about the breath? Because I know that it's a big focus. I know you have to get going, but
yeah, we this has been so fun. I really appreciate our conversation.
It's amazing.
I want to show you this. This is ferrofluid. So it's a magnetic liquid. I've been really trying to articulate how the magnetic and electrical bodies move through plasma. And if you haven't ever played with ferrofluid, it's like very dirty. So this is ferrofluid inside of water, and I have like a very strong magnet here. And we've been thinking of the toroidal field as this like beautiful little like thing that we get to expand in, but our magnetism is like spiky and circular. It's open. So as people experience anger, try to feel your voltage. Like, try to feel the spikes that are coming at it. When you feel sadness, try to feel the implosion that's happening within you, and like start to dialogue with this emotional electromagnetic field that's constantly expanding and collapsing around you. And when it expands, that state of enthusiasm or excitement, notice what you're doing. And when it's collapsing, notice what you're doing. That's our dialogue with the voltage. I just want to heighten that for people. And that's what my programs do. But the future is in us trusting how the voltage is communicating with us. And, I'm hoping that you and I assisted people in
Yeah.
those
That's
thoughts.
amazing. Yeah, you are amazing. I always ask everybody, if you were going to die today, this was the last thing you could say to the world, what would you want to share?
Be mighty. We all live infinitely. It's lots of embodiments to get exactly where you are. Do not die in this lifetime thinking that you didn't, do the brave thing. So mightiness to me is that layer of voltage where you're unafraid and you're connected to that higher plane. That would be my stay up.
I love it. Yes, be mighty. I love that. Yeah, I'll make sure I refer everybody to that 90-minute lecture is amazing, and all of your stuff online. So you're a great teacher, you're a cool human being, and I'm so glad that we could connect and you could share all of this today.
Thank you for having a deep conversation with me. I've done a lot of the sciencey podcasts lately, and I think that you're nailing the energy that people really need to hear spoken to. The physiology, the body itself is only going to get us so far, but it's this other level that's truly inspiring. It's what people are really looking for. They want to know that there's something outside of themselves that they can connect to that will make them feel powerful. And I really appreciate the conversation that you curated for us this morning. Thank you.
No, I thank you. It's been very inspiring and fun. So it's been equally as fun on this side. Thank you. Right on.
Thank you for listening to the episode. Be sure to subscribe to the show on Spotify, YouTube, and iTunes, and rate the show. I hope you enjoyed the episode.
What we call reality is in fact nothing more than a culturally sanctioned and linguistically reinforced hallucination.